This video is part 2 of an ongoing series, so if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go watch it right now. It was so much fun filming this part, so enjoy the book. Chapter 2. The following document, classified top secret by the US Department of Defense, was released to the public in 1986 through the Freedom of Information Act. The document is now kept in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and can be accessed there. The investigations recorded here were carried out under the direction of Major James P. Warren from March to April 1946. The field investigation in name deleted country, Yamanashi Prefecture, was conducted by Second Lieutenant Robert O'Connor and Master Surgeon Harold Katayama. The interrogator in all interviews was Lieutenant O'Connor. Surgeon Katayama handled the Japanese interpreting, and Private William Cohen prepared the documents. Interviews were conducted over a 12-day period in the reception room of the name-deleted town hall in Yamanashi Prefecture. The following witnesses responded individually to Lieutenant O'Connor's questions. A female teacher at the name-deleted town, name-deleted country, public school, a doctor residing in the same town, 2 patrolmen assigned to the local police precinct, and 6 children. The appended 1 to 10,000 and 1 to 2,000 maps of the area in questions were provided by the Topographic Institute of Ministry of Home Affairs. U.S. Army Intelligence Section, MIS. Report dated May 12, 1946. Title: Report on Rice Bowl Hill Incident. 1944 document number, blah blah blah. The following is a taped interview with Setsuko Okomachi, 26-year-old teacher in charge of the 4th grade B class at the public school in deleted town, deleted country. Materials related to the interview can be accessed using application number blah blah blah. Impressions of the interviewer, Lieutenant Robert O'Connor. Setsuko Okomachi is an attractive, petite woman. Intelligent and responsible. She responded to the questions accurately and honestly. She still seems slightly in shock though from the incident. As she searched her memory, she grew very tense at times, and whenever this happened, she had a tendency to speak more slowly. Before we move on, I just wanted to say this is a female character. I tried my best doing female voice impression, but it just didn't work. I think it must have been just after 10 in the morning when I saw a silver light far up in the sky, a brilliant flash of silver. That's right, it was definitely a light reflecting off something metal. That light moved very slowly in the sky from east to west. We all thought it had to be a B-29. It was directly above us. To see it, we had to look straight up. It was a clear blue sky, and the light was so bright, all we could see was that silver, duralumin-like object. But we couldn't make out the shape, since it was too far up. I assumed that they couldn't see us either, so we weren't afraid of being attacked or having bombs suddenly rain down on us. Dropping bombs in the mountains here would be pretty pointless anyway. I figured the plane was on its way to bomb some large city somewhere, or maybe on its way back from a raid. So we kept on walking. All I thought was how that light had a strange beauty to it. According to military records, no US bombers or any kind of aircraft were flying over that region at the time. That is, around 10 a.m. on November 7, 1944. But I saw it clearly, and so did the 16 children in my class. All of us thought it had to be a B-29. We had all seen many informations of B-29s, and those are the only kind of planes that could possibly fly that high. There was a small airbase in the prefecture, and I would occasionally see Japanese planes flying, but they were all small and could never fly as high as what I saw. Besides, the only duralumin reflex light is different from other types of metal, and the only planes made out of that are B-29s. I did think it was a little strange though that it was a solo plane flying all by itself, not part of a formation. Were you born in this region? No. I was born in Hiroshima. I got married in 1941, and that's when I came here. My husband was a music teacher in junior high school in this prefecture. He was called up in 1943 and died fighting in Luzon in June of 1945. From what I heard later, he was guarding an ammunition dump just outside Manila when it was hit by an American shells and blew up, killing him. We have no children. Speaking of children, how many were you in charge of on that outing? 16 altogether. Boys and girls. 2 were out sick, but other than that, it was the entire class. 8 boys and 8 girls. 5 of them were children who had been evacuated from Tokyo. We set out from the school at 9 in the morning. It was a typical school outing, so everyone carried canteens and lunches with them. We had nothing in particular we were planning to study. We were just going up into the hills to gather mushrooms and edible wild plants. The area around where we lived was a farmland, so we weren't that badly off in terms of food, which isn't to say we had plenty to eat. There's a strict rationing system in the place, and most of us were hungry all the time. So the children were encouraged to hunt for food wherever they could find it. The country was at war, after all, and food took priority over studying. Everyone went on this kind of school outing, outdoor study sessions, as they were called. Since the school was surrounded by hills and woods, there was a lot of nice spots we used to go. I think we were blessed in that sense. People in cities were all starving. Supply routes from Taiwan and the continent had been cut off by this time, and urban areas were suffering terribly from lack of food and fuel. You mentioned that five of your pupils had been evacuated from Tokyo. Did they get along well with the local children? In my class, at least they did. The environments the two groups grew up in, of course, were completely different. One way out of the country, the other in the heart of Tokyo. They spoke differently, even dressed differently. Most of the local kids were from poor farming families, while the majority of the Tokyo children had fathers who worked for companies or in the civil service. So I couldn't say they really understood each other. Especially in the beginning, you could sense some tension between the two groups. I'm not saying they bullied each other or got into fights because they didn't. What I mean is, one group didn't seem to understand what the other group was thinking, so they tended to keep to themselves. The local kids with other local kids, the Tokyo children in their own little group. This was only the first 2 months though. After that, they got along well. You know this, when kids start playing together and get completely absorbed by whatever they're doing, they don't care about things like that anymore. I would like you to describe, in as much detail as you can, the spot where you took your class that day. It was a hill we often went to on outings. It was a round hill shaped like an upside down bowl. We usually called it Ovanyama. It was a short walk to the west of the school and wasn't steep at all, so anybody could climb it. At the children's pace, it took somewhere around 2 hours to get to the top. Along the way, they would search the woods for mushrooms and we would have a simple lunch. The children naturally enjoyed going on these outdoor sessions much more than staying in our classroom studying. The glittering airplane we saw way up in the sky reminded us for a moment of the war, but just for a short time, and we were all in a good mood. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, no wind, and everything was quiet around us. All we could hear were birds chirping in the woods. The war seemed like something in a faraway land that had nothing to do with us. We sang songs as we hiked up the hill, sometimes imitating the birds we heard. Except for the fact that the war was still going on, it was a perfect morning. It was soon after you observed the airplane like object that you went into the woods, correct? That is correct. I would say it was less than 5 minutes later that we went into the woods. We left the main trail up the hill and went along a trampled down path that went up the slope of the woods. It was pretty steep. After we hiked for about 10 minutes, we came to a clearing, a broad area as flat as a tabletop. Once we entered the woods, it was completely still, and with the sun blacked out, it was chilly. But when we stepped into that clearing, it was like we were in a miniature town square with the sky bright above us. My class often stopped by this spot whenever we climbed Ovanyama. The place had a calming effect and somehow made us all feel nice and cozy. We took a break once we reached this square, putting down our packs, and then the children went into the woods in groups of 3 or 4 in search of mushrooms. I insisted that they never lose sight of one another. Before they set out, I gathered them all together and made sure they understood this. We knew the place well, but it was woods after all, and if any of them get separated and lost, we would have a hard time finding them. Still, you have to remember these are small children, and once they start hunting mushrooms, they tend to forget this rule. So I always made sure that as I looked for mushrooms myself, I kept an eye on them and running a head count. It was about 10 minutes or so after we began hunting mushrooms that the children started to collapse. When I first spotted a group of 3 of them collapse on the ground, I was sure they had eaten poisonous mushrooms. There are a lot of highly toxic mushrooms around here, even ones that can be fatal. The local kids know which ones not to pick, but a few varieties are hard to distinguish. That's why I always warn the children never to put any in their mouths until we got back to school and had an expert check them. But you can't always expect kids to listen, can you? I raced over to the spot and lifted up the children who had fallen to the ground. Their bodies were limp, like rubber that's been left out in the sun. It was like carrying empty shells. The strength was completely drained from them, but they were breathing fine. Their pulses were normal, and none of them had a temperature. They looked calm, not at all like they were in any sort of pain. I ruled out things like bee stings or snake bites. The children were simply unconscious. The strangest thing was their eyes. Their bodies were so limp, it was like they were in a coma. Yet, their eyes were open as if they were looking at something. They would blink every once in a while, so it wasn't like they were asleep. And their eyes moved very slowly from side to side, like they were scanning a distant horizon. Their eyes at least were conscious, but they weren't actually looking at anything, or at least nothing visible. I waved my hand a few times in front of the faces, but got no reaction. I picked up each of the three children in turn, and they were all exactly the same. All of them were unconscious, their eyes slowly moving from side to side. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Describe the group that first collapsed. It was a group of girls. Three girls who were all good friends. I called out their names and slapped them on the cheek. Pretty hard, in fact, but there was no reaction. They didn't feel a thing. It was a strange feeling, like touching a void. My first thought was to send somebody running back to school for help. There was no way I could carry three unconscious children down by myself. So I started looking for the fastest runner in the class, one of the boys. But when I stood up and looked around, I saw that all the children had collapsed. All 16 of them had fallen to the ground and lost consciousness. The only one still conscious and standing was me. It was like a battlefield. Did you notice anything unusual at the scene? Any strange smell, or sound, or light? Thinks about it for a while? No. As I already said, it was very quiet and peaceful. No unusual sound, or light, or smells. The only thing unusual was that every single pupil in my class had collapsed and was lying there unconscious. I felt utterly alone, like I was the last person alive on earth. I cannot describe that feeling of total loneliness. I just wanted to disappear into thin air and not think about anything. Of course, I couldn't do that. I had my duty as a teacher. I pulled myself together and raced down the slope as fast as my legs would carry me to get help at the school. Chapter 3. It's nearly dawn when I wake up. I draw the curtain back and take a look. It must have just stopped raining since everything is still wet and drippy. Clouds to the east are sharply edged against the sky, each one framed by light. The sky looks ominous one minute, inviting the next. It all depends on the angle. The bus plows down the highway at a set speed, the tires humming along, never getting any louder or softer. Same with the engine. Its monotonous sound like a mortar, smoothly grinding down time and the consciousness of the people on board. The other passengers are all sunk back in their seats, asleep, the curtains drawn tight. The driver and I are the only ones awake. We're being carried, efficiently and numbly, toward our destination. Feeling thirsty, I take a bottle of mineral water from my pocket of my backpack and drink some of the lukewarm water. From the same pocket, I pull out a box of soda crackers and munch a few, enjoying that familiar dry taste. According to my watch, it's 4:32. I check the date and day of the week, just to be on the safe side. 13 hours since I left home. Time hasn't leaped ahead more than it should or done unexpected bout. It's still my birthday, still the first day of my brand new life. I shut my eyes, open them again checking the time and date on my watch. Then I switch on the reading light, take out a paperback book, and start reading. Just after 5, without warning, the bus pulls off the highway and comes to a stop in the corner of a roadside rest area. The front door of the bus opens with an airy hiss. Lights blink on inside, and the bus driver makes a brief announcement. Good morning, everybody. Hope you had a good rest. We are on schedule and should arrive in the final stop at Takamatsu Station in about an hour. But we're stopping here for a 20-minute break. We'll be leaving again at 5:30, so please be sure to be back on board by then. The announcement wakes up most of the passengers, and they silently struggle to their feet, yawning as they stumble out of the bus. This is where people make themselves presentable before arriving in Takamatsu. I get off too, take a couple of deep breaths, and do some simple stretching exercises in the fresh morning air. I walk over to the men's room and splash some water on my face. I'm wondering where the heck we are. I go outside and look around. Nothing special, just the typical roadside scenery you'd find next to a highway. Maybe I'm just imagining things, but the shape of the hills and the color of the trees seem different from those back in Tokyo. I'm inside the cafeteria, sipping free cup of hot tea, when this young girl comes over and plonks herself down on the plastic seat next to me. In her right hand, she has a paper cup of hot coffee she bought from a vending machine, the steam rising up from it. And in her left hand, she's holding a small container with sandwiches inside. Another bit of vending machine gourmet fare, by the looks of it. She's kind of funny looking. Her face is out of balance, broad forehead, button nose, freckled cheeks, and pointy ears, slammed together. Rough sort of face you can't ignore. Still, the whole package isn't so bad. For all I know, maybe she's not so wild about her own looks, but she seems comfortable with who she is, and that's the important thing. There's something childish about her that has a calming effect, at least on me. She isn't very tall, but has a good looking legs and a nice bust for such a slim body. Her thin metal earrings sparkle like duralumin. She wears a dark brown, almost reddish dyed hair down to her shoulders and has a long sleeved crewneck shirt with white stripes. A small leather backpack hangs from one shoulder and a light sweater tied around her neck. A cream colored miniskirt completes her outfit, with no stockings. She's evidently washed her face, since a few strands of hair, like the thin roots of plant, are plastered to her broad forehead. Strangely enough, those loose strands of hair draw me to her. You were on the bus, weren't you? She asks me. Her voice is a little husky. Yeah, that's right. She frowns as she takes a sip of the coffee. How old are you? 17. I lie. So you're in high school? I nod. Where you headed? Takamatsu. Same with me, she says. Are you visiting or do you live there? I'm visiting, I reply. Me too. I have a friend there, a girlfriend of mine. How about you? Relatives. I see. Her nod says no more questions. I got a younger brother the same age as you. She suddenly tells me as if she just remembered. Things happened and we haven't seen each other for a long time. You know something? You look a lot like that guy. Anybody ever tell you that? What guy? You know, the guy who sings in that band. As soon as I saw you in the bus, I thought you looked like him, but I just can't come up with his name. I must have busted a hole in my brain trying to remember. That happens sometimes, right? It's on tip of your tongue, but you just can't think of it. Hasn't anybody said that to you before? That you remind them of somebody? I shake my head. Nobody's ever said that to me. She's still staring at me, eyes narrowed intently. What kind of person do you mean? I ask. A TV guy. A guy who's on TV? Right, she says, picking up her ham sandwich and taking an uninspired bite, washing it down with a sip of coffee. A guy who sings in some band. Darn, I can't even think of the band's name either. This tall guy who has Kansai accent. You don't have any idea who I mean? Sorry, I don't watch TV. The girl frowns and gives me a hard look. You don't watch at all? I shake my head silently. Wait a sec, should I nod or shake my head here? I go with a nod. Not very talkative, are you? One line at a time seems your style. Are you always this quiet? I blush. I'm sort of a quiet type to begin with, but part of the reason I don't want to say much is that my voice hasn't changed completely. Most of the time, I got kind of a low voice, but all of a sudden, it turns on and lets out a squeak. So I try to keep whatever I say short and sweet. Anyway, she goes on. What I'm trying to say is, you look a lot like that singer with the Kansai accent. Not that you have Kansai accent or anything. It's just, I don't know, there's something about you that's a lot like him. He seems like a real nice guy. That's all. Her smile steps off stage for a moment, then does an encore, all while I'm dealing with my blushing face. You would resemble him even more if you changed your hair, she says. Let it grow out a little. Use some gel to make it flip up a bit. I would love to give it a try. You would definitely look good like that. Actually, I'm a hairdresser. I nod and sip my tea. The cafeteria is dead silent. None of the usual background music. Nobody else talking besides the two of us. Maybe you don't like talking? She says, resting her head in one hand and giving me a serious look. I shake my head. No, that's not it. You think it's pain to talk to people? One more shake of my head. She picks up her other sandwich with strawberry jam instead of ham, then frowns and gives me this look of disbelief. Would you eat this for me? I hate strawberry jam sandwiches more than anything, ever since I was a kid. I take it from her. Strawberry jam sandwiches aren't exactly on my top 10 list either, but I don't say a word and start eating. From across the table, she watches until I finish every last crumb. Could you do me a favor? She says. A favor? Can I sit next to you until we get to Takamatsu? I just can't relax when I sit by myself. I always feel like some weird person is going to plop himself down next to me, and then I can't get to sleep. When I bought my ticket, they told me they were all single seats, but when I got on, I saw they were all doubles. I just want to catch few winks before you arrive, and you seem like a nice guy. Do you mind? No problem. Thanks, she says. In traveling, a companion, as the saying goes. I nod. Nod. That's all I seem capable of. But what should I say? How does that end? She asks. How does what end? After a companion, how does it go? I can't remember. I never was really good at Japanese. In life, compassion, I say. In traveling, a companion. In life, compassion. She repeats, making sure of it. If she had paper and pencil, it wouldn't surprise me if she wrote it down. So what does it really mean? In simple terms, I think it over. It takes me a while to gather my thoughts, but she waits patiently. I think it means, I say, that chance encounters are what keep us going, in simple terms. She mulls that over for a while, then slowly brings her hands together on top of the table and rests them there lightly. I think you're right about that chance encounters keep us going. I glance at my watch. It's 5:30 already. Maybe we better be getting back. Yeah, I guess so. Let's go, she says. Making no move though, to get up. By the way, where are we? I ask. I have no idea, she says. She cranes her neck and sweeps the place with her eyes. Her earrings jiggle back and forth like two precarious pieces of ripe fruit ready to fall. From the time, I'm guessing we're near Kurashiki? Not that it matters. A rest area on a highway is just a place you pass through to get from here to there. She holds up her right index finger and left index finger about 12 inches apart. What does it matter what's it called? She continues. You got your restroom and your food, your fluorescent light and your plastic chairs, crappy coffee, strawberry jam sandwiches. It's all pointless, assuming you try to find point to it. We're coming from somewhere, heading somewhere else, and that's all you need to know, right? I nod and nod and nod. When we get back to the bus, the other passengers are already aboard, with just us holding things up. The driver's a young guy with his intense look that reminds me of some stern watchman. He turns a reproachful gaze on two of us, but doesn't say anything, and the girl shoots him an innocent, sorry we're late smile. He reaches out to push a lever, and the door hisses closed. The girl looks her little suitcase over and sits down beside me. A nothing kind of suitcase she must have picked up at some discount place, and I pick it up for her and store it away in the overhead rack. Pretty heavy for its size. She thanks me, then reclines her seat and fades off to sleep. Like it can barely wait to get going, the bus starts to roll the instant we get settled. I pull out my paperback and pick up where I've left off. The girl's soon fast asleep, and as the bus sways through each curve, her head leans against my shoulder, finally coming to a rest there. Mouth closed, she's breathing quietly through her nose, the breath grazing my shoulder at regular beats. I look down and catch a glimpse of her bra strap through the collar of her crewneck shirt, a thin, cream-colored strap. I picture a delicate fabric at the end of that strap, the soft breasts beneath, pink nipples taut under my fingertips. Not that I'm trying to imagine all this, but I just can't help it. And no surprise, I get a massive hard-on. So rigid, it makes me wonder how any part of your body could ever get so rock hard. Just then, a thought hits me. Maybe, just maybe, this girl is my sister. She's about the right age. Her outlooks aren't at all like the girls in the photo, but you can always count on that. Depending on how they're taken, people sometimes look totally different. She said she has a brother my age who she hasn't seen in ages. Couldn't that brother be me? In theory, at least. I stare at her chest. As she breathes, the rounded peaks move up and down like the swell of waves, somehow reminding me of rain falling softly on a broad stretch of sea. I'm the lonely voyager standing on deck, and she's the sea. The sky is a blanket of gray, merging with the gray sea off on the horizon. It's hard to tell the difference between sea and sky, between voyager and sea. between reality and the workings of the heart. The girl wears 2 rings on her fingers, neither of which is wedding or engagement ring, just cheap things you find at those little beauty girl shop at. Her fingers are long and thin but look strong. The nails are short and nicely trimmed with a light pink polish. Her hands are resting lightly on her knees, thrust out from her miniskirt. I want to touch those hands, but of course I don't. Asleep. She looks like a young child. One pointy ear picks out from the strands of hair like a little mushroom, looking strangely fragile. I shut my book and look for a while at the passing scenery, but very soon, before I realize it, I fall asleep myself. If you enjoyed the video, go to the comment section and tell me what you guys think about the series. If you guys want more of these videos, hit the like button and subscribe. Peace!